Hello and welcome to the IP Author Podcast. We're talking all things AI and IP. I am your host, Saskia van Reineveld, CEO of Executive Communications Coaching and actress.
I'm Samir, founder and CEO of IP Author.
And welcome. So, Samir, recently you have been at a conference and you've been getting a little bit of a lay of the land of what's happening in this world of AI and IP. So, tell me, what were your first impressions? What were the things that you noticed from this particular space?
So, Saskia, you remember that last year when I went to a couple of conferences and we did an episode, a podcast, a session on this where
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on? The whole world is going towards AI. And when you go to these conferences, all the vendors are basically pitching the same old sort of pre-AI tools and software
Yes.
that have already become absolutely obsolete. But it seems like nobody's paying attention. And then I think, predicted that, the three vendors who are currently sort of the AI vendors will replace all the other sort of 50 non-AI vendors in due course. That's what we had discussed, right?
Yeah.
Well, that was a European conference last year. Yesterday, I came back from a conference in the US, and this conference, completely different picture. Every remaining vendor on the demo floor or on the sort of in the demo area was an AI vendor,
Wow.
new age AI vendor. Pretty much all the others have taken a back seat or taken a step down. So
Wow.
the silver sponsors at this conference were all sort of AI vendors, and then all the legacy vendors, so to speak, had all taken the bronze sponsorships, right?
Wow.
And there were like two or three non-AI vendors left, but there were just a handful. Pretty much everybody else was an AI vendor.
Wow.
The other interesting thing is that pretty much all of them are new AI vendors. So the three or four that I'd mentioned that I'd seen last year in Germany, those, including us, were there. But then there were a whole bunch of new AI vendors, some of them with
Wow.
decent amount of capital, many of them with excellent products, innovative solutions, etc. Quite eye-opening, and the speed with which this happened is also pretty remarkable, right? Now, we are not comparing apples to apples. Europe moves differently from America, but the trajectory is clear. It's happening almost as predicted with a few differences.
Were you
And
were you surprised? I mean, even though that you had seen this coming, like you were there and you could see the landscape, how it was going to play out in the future, were you still taken aback at how quick this was and how many new people, new faces there were?
well, so a couple of surprises here, right? Number one, the velocity with which new players are entering the market. Also, the amount of capital that these companies have raised. Like one of the companies actually threw up a fireworks show on top of an aircraft carrier, right, for
Wow.
the participants, right? Because they've raised, I don't know, 40, $60 million or whatever, and they don't know what to do with it. But
So
the
fireworks.
point is, yes, the fireworks, right? Like, why not?
Of course.
So you can see all of the excesses of the dot-com era, like some echoes of that playing out now.
Okay.
You can see some of that happening. But also, one of the things that, again, from my past experience, when we started Dolcera, my previous company, initially there were only a few companies that were taking the same approach of, putting all the patent information on the internet and making really cool tools and technologies around it. That's what we were doing at Dolcera. That also played out the same way. Like initially there were a few people, and then all of a sudden the numbers exploded, and then it became a very competitive market, very difficult to play, and so on, right? And yeah.
And And you're having to look at how do you now differentiate yourself against all of the other kids who've decided to come and play in the same playground. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
what
Like,
makes you
I mean,
special? What makes you
I
different?
thought I was the only one doing the monkey bars, but
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But no, no.
no,
Now suddenly there's a line, and you're not going to get as much time,
no.
which is quite frustrating. Okay, yeah. So I mean, okay. So you've been in this position before. You've the journey of being an entrepreneur. You've gone through this experience of having come into a space. You've having been, a little bit there ahead, seeing the opportunities, taking advantage of that space of being one of the few there, and then watching as the competitors start arriving. So kind of what are the things that you're thinking about at the moment, or how do you analyze this particular landscape? Is there a sense of nervousness, or is there a sense of kind of like there's motivation because now there's more competition? You know, how are you
Yeah, I
looking
mean,
at the space?
all of the above, but really, like, I mean, that what it shows and what one everybody has predicted for a while, and there are no surprises, etc., etc. One
Mm,
can see, a that the barriers to entry are low.
okay.
B, the access to capital is pretty high. Like
Mm,
those two items are definitely obvious and somewhat predictable.
mm,
What wasn't necessarily a given, but which is turning out to be more or less true, is the demand side of the story, right?
mm,
The customer base, whether it's law firms, corporations, they are all clear that they want to use AI, and they want to use
right.
AI extensively, and that they don't want to build it internally by themselves. Some of them still think they can build
Okay.
it, but like many of them have realized that, they would rather use the experts. They are not in the business of, building IP tools. They're never in the
Right.
business of building IP tools. They want to use. So all of those items hold true.
What are the things that are different?
Uh, I mean, so I guess I'm still processing, to be honest, right?
Mm,
And what I feel is that the typical response in this situation is, there's a land grab, basically, right?
okay.
The companies that get the most customers, the companies that get the most traction, that have the best product, that understand customer needs the best, that have raised the most capital, that have the most sales,
Mm,
marketing, etc., etc. They all eventually bubble up on top. If you
mhm,
make some mistakes, unforced errors, that'll hurt you.
mhm.
All of that. So it's kind of, business 101, if you will, at this point, right? Like,
Sure.
there's an opportunity, fast growing opportunity. Customers are going to go out and buy a certain type of product. It's clear.
Hmm.
There are a bunch of vendors who are offering relatively undifferentiated or similar products, etc. Now you have to go, 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 right?
Yeah.
You're
Well,
smiling.
because we were talking about how I have quite a similar experience in that because you wouldn't think that entrepreneurs and actresses are sharing in their respective career experiences, but I too have sat in a casting room and seen a whole bunch of people who look just like me, and you're thinking to yourself, how do I make myself stand out? How am I different? How am I going to book this job, even though the girl sitting next to me has exactly the same kind of hairstyle? We're both of a similar height. We seem to have the same kind of bubbly energy. So, where is my differentiating factor? What's my USP? Which,
And how do you, but you can't do a land grab, right? Like you can't like say, okay, how many movies I sign up for, or whatever, how
yeah,
many
yeah,
gigs I
yeah.
sign up for, because those gigs are not all coming together. So,
No, no. And also because there's such a fine balance between booking something because you're really good, just based on your merit, and then booking something because you do become a bit of the flavor of the month. You'll notice that, especially if you're in the ecosystem, particularly somewhere like London, you'll start to see that a certain actor is just working all the time. They're in this film, and then they're in that TV series, and they're doing this play, and it
mhm.
just and there's a feeling of like people want them. I wonder, is it the same in your space? Do you notice people or customers getting a little kind of obsessed or crazy about a certain product? Whether that is the best product is perhaps not necessarily the question, but somehow that product has managed to capture the attention, has managed to capture the kind of desires of the market.
Yes, I mean it must happen. It must happen from a product side, right? But it is very deliberate, right? Like it's not. I mean, it is. It doesn't just happen by chance, in my opinion. I mean, again, I don't know. I haven't. I mean, I haven't sort of engineered something like this myself before, but I can see that like there is this effort, right, of overwhelming the market with investment, right? Like you
Okay.
can see those efforts, right? Like
Yeah.
the VCs will like flood, like the SoftBank strategy, right? Like SoftBank has done it again. Like they just put billions of dollars into WeWork, and they put billions of dollars into
Oh,
Uber, and like that
okay.
is one way, right? Like you just put so much capital to work and you just overwhelm the market that
Mm.
it's like almost like there is no alternative, right? Like we all have to have, like
Yes. Yeah. Because we
we all
don't
have
think of
to
any of
use
the other
WeWork, right?
options. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is one strategy that they try to engineer, right? Like um, in terms of like products, there is the word of mouth, like certain
Mm.
products do become the flavor of the day, but
Hmm.
but that only happens in my opinion, that only happens in markets where one company just took like zigged, and while everybody zagged, or one company
Okay.
was just way ahead of the curve. This is not that market where somebody is
Really.
just going to be allowed to run away with a significant amount of market share, etc., etc., right?
Okay.
It's just there's too much capital sitting around. There's too much. There are too many entrepreneurs who can build very good products, right?
I think if I've learned anything in this industry, it's that there's no clear path to success. There's rules and there's no rules, and it's kind of totally up for grabs, whichever way you manage to figure out your success. Um,
Yeah, that pretty much
yeah,
describes entrepreneurship.
exactly.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
rules and then there's no rules.
Yeah, I don't know where the rules are actually.
Yeah, yeah.
There's probably rules, but they're not
They're not the ones
they've
that
not
you're
been
following.
published. Yeah, they've not been published. I haven't seen them. They probably
Yes.
exist somewhere.
Exactly. But have you had the experience of looking at other people and going, oh, okay, that seems to be a strategy that's working for that person. And then you try to follow that strategy, but then I don't know if you've had the experience of going, oh, well, that actually doesn't quite align with us. That's actually
Yeah.
not really working for our thing or what we're trying to create. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So I read like a long time ago, like 20 years ago, during my initial sort of entrepreneurship efforts,
Uh-huh.
somebody said that, there are like millions and millions of ways to fail at entrepreneurship, right? Like there are
Great.
infinite number of ways in which you can fail at entrepreneurship. There are only few ways to succeed,
Okay.
and so there are data points that like second time entrepreneurs have just a slightly higher success rate than first time entrepreneurs, right?
Interesting.
But it's not super high actually, right?
Okay.
In terms of actual success, right? I have friends who've been like amazingly successful first time around,
Yes.
and their second efforts have fallen flat, right? Like it doesn't work, right?
That's so
So
disappointing because
no,
you'd
no, no.
think,
I mean, it
yeah.
just it's hard, right? Like I mean,
Mm,
and there's so many parameters at play, right? Like
yeah.
the things under your control, the things outside of your control. There's capital, access to
Mm,
capital. There's interest rates. There's COVID. All sorts of things that could
yeah.
derail some of the best laid plans, right?
Hmm.
So nothing is can be taken for granted. Nothing is a given. Everything
Hmm.
is dynamic from an entrepreneurship standpoint. But no, I mean there are formulas like this current time where we are seeing an obvious demand like rising,
Mm.
and massive amount of innovation being done at the same time. This is a known sort of pattern, right? Like this is
Cool.
not
Yeah.
something new and surprising. But succeeding in this time, there isn't a clear-cut formula, because, and I mean, we saw that with Dolcera, the previous company that I was running, right? Like, initially we had a head start, that time we didn't have that much capital, so we were somewhat capital constrained. So we grew until, the competition increased to a certain point, and then the growth slowed down, right? The initial growth was rapid, then, it somewhat slowed down as the competition grew, as the demand was finally met by the overall set of suppliers available. This time we thought that, we anticipate something similar happening. We will have capital. Capital will help us solve that challenge. But no, because,
So
there's
interesting.
lots more capital coming in, right?
Yeah.
So that capital advantage has been somewhat eliminated, right?
Okay.
And so again, like, the same challenge, right? Like we'll probably grow until, there will be a little bit of consolidation, there'll be a little bit of stabilization, once every customer's demands are have been met. So this is still a story that'll play out over 5, 7, 10 years. That's my current prediction. But maybe it would play out in the next 2 years because,
Yeah.
everything seems to be accelerated this time around.
I just thought it was an interesting irony that you're playing in an AI space and you're competing as though it would have been another kind of situation of entrepreneurship and technology and products and so on. But there's something about the nature of AI and the fact that you're using these tools, and that maybe that's what also creates this competitive landscape, because you're selling an AI product, but you're leveraging AI itself to build the company and to compete with competitors. And I think maybe I don't know if you've
Yeah,
got any
that
thoughts
that
of
is
that.
another wrinkle though, right? Like, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like in your world, can you imagine a world where like there are like three people who kind of like look like you, but then they're like, 30, like the director is thinking, you know what, like I can probably like take this other person and they will also be like they can also be made to look like. so
Yes.
so it's like an infinite number of you all of a sudden, right? Like,
Exactly.
I mean, it is kind of like that, isn't it? Because we have a situation where like our customers like why do we need you? Like, some of the customers like, I think we can build this ourselves. Like, we
Yeah.
got like we can just
I mean, we could
license.
just use AI to do it,
Yeah,
and
we can
AI will
use
build
AI
what
and
you're
build
doing.
build. Yeah, exactly. um and that's where, I think that's not something I worry about as much because,
Okay.
for a couple of reasons. AI continues to improve, but not at fast enough pace to be able to sort of make it so easy for people to build their own sophisticated products, right? Like, I mean, if you're an individual law firm, like a small law firm, you have let's say very fixed set of types of patents that you are writing, and you are very tech savvy, you can create your own collection of prompts or workflows and keep them ready, and then just use, your $20 a month license of Claude or ChatGPT, and you can do a really good job with your patents, right? And you will have
Sure.
you won't need IP author. But by and large, if you're a larger law firm, if you are doing diverse work, especially if you're a corporation, there's so many things you have to worry about in terms of like, maintaining consistency, being able to scale, being able to handle all sorts of different types of inventions, inventor scenarios, clarifying inventions. There is a whole series of workflow. You want to conduct like, detailed searches. You want to landscape your space so that you know exactly what you're going to produce. All of those things, don't exist, without sufficient amount of investment. And if you're going to make an investment, then you might as well, bring in the experts who have built platforms that scale, whose investments have been amortized across multiple companies and so on. So there, the build versus buy decision becomes very, very clear, right?
Can you differentiate, like from the conference that you were seeing, could you see the difference in those kinds of people or those kinds of offerings?
So at this point, right, like what I saw was that pretty much everybody who is there has been in this business for at least 2-3 years.
Okay.
They have raised some amount of capital, right? And this is in several millions of dollars at the minimum, right?
Okay.
So there were no unserious people there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
They were all serious. Many of them are new to, let's say, the world of IP, but they are extremely sharp entrepreneurs, right? Like they have technical skills, so they may have some business background that gives them the edge. The other thing that everybody has done, because there is so much capital, they have been building really excellent teams. So you can see some really good talent, like in our space, talent from patent offices, talent from law firms, all converging to this world, right? Because let's face it, law firms are dreary places to work. And so far, there are all these young people, really, really smart young people who, if you went to law school, all you could do is, go to a law firm and hope to become a partner, right? Well, they, at least the more, the smarter ones amongst them are jumping ship, right?
Okay, cool.
And they're saying, okay, we're going to do this thing. And so we are attracting companies like us, we are attracting some of the best talented entrepreneurial lawyers, which is exactly what, as a society, we want. But now they are not just working for us; they are working for our competitors also, which kind of sucks.
Damn.
But that is definitely happening. So to answer your question, I didn't see any unserious people.
Okay.
I didn't see any dabblers. All I saw was talented, motivated people who are attracting the experts they need to close the loop, to make this whole thing work, right? That means that the teams that are being put together are top class. Okay. And so if you are a legacy vendor, or if you are an unserious player, don't even bother, right?
No.
Like it's not going to be a cakewalk, right?
Okay.
Having said that, there are a lot of serious players entering, so not a cakewalk for us either.
What do you think about the idea of an AI bubble? And the reason why I ask this is because I'm interested in what you're saying, in the sense that there's lots of capital and that there's a feeling of like excitement about what can be built on top of AI and so on. And I know you and I, we've spoken a lot about how like AI is a sure thing now. It's not necessarily that this is just going to be whipped away for some reason or in some way. But do you get a sense, if there's so much capital, so much interest in an opportunity, there is going to be at some point a kind of culling of those who don't survive, or maybe it's kind of inflated the opportunity. I don't know if what do you think of that?
So I think this is different from, first of all, the word bubble is complex, I feel like, because this is different from 1999, right? Like that's when I did a startup back then, right? It was almost like revenues don't matter. Like, if you build it, they will come. There were all sorts of very strange notions in vogue back then, right? This time, that's not the case. Like everybody who is funded right now, right? They have some revenues. Now, they may be funded at a level which their revenues don't sort of justify. There's already those companies are just getting acquired, like some of those companies, some of the companies like Solve Intelligence or Harvey are actually making acquisitions right now, right?
Okay.
And the companies, I presume, that they are acquiring have some really interesting technologies or customers, but perhaps not enough momentum or traction to become like large independent businesses themselves, right? Something like that, correct? So that is definitely going on right now, right? The culling will continue, right? And it'll be organic. then the companies that have been funded for too high a valuation that doesn't just is not justified by their revenues, well, there will be some
Adjustment.
adjustment for them
Okay.
also. And then what will be left, if those companies grow fast, they will go public. If they don't grow fast, they will go to private equity, right? I mean, that whole thing happens. But I think there are things outside of our control that'll determine whether we are in a bubble or not. And those things are like interest rates, right? So,
Okay.
for example, for let's say a company is not growing at a hockey stick level, but it is growing at a linear pace. And let's say a private equity firm wants to acquire them. Well, the private equity firms can't do anything right now because interest rates are high and going higher. So if in that climate, that whole private equity option goes away. So then all these companies will have to somehow sort of mush together, or they will be
Okay.
kind of some kind of zombies or something like that. Like that could happen, right? And that those types of things may take the form of a burst bubble, because people will be like, look, all these companies
There
that
it
have
is.
been in, there are a couple of hockey sticks, and the rest of the companies are just zombies. We have like a zombified world of businesses. So in an interest rate environment like this, there is that possibility, which could very much look like a crash or something like that, because these companies, once they've used up a lot of their capital, and once they stop growing really, really fast, they'll have to, cut back on fireworks on an aircraft carrier, for example, right? Which
Sure.
means that, there are fewer jobs in the hospitality industry in, those types of cities, right?
Yeah.
So that would look very much like a crash, right? If it
Okay.
happens enough number of times.
Right.
My sense, though, is that the this venture capital boom hasn't been very vast, in the sense the amount of capital invested outside of the Anthropics and OpenAI. Outside of that, the amount of venture capital being invested is not super high right now,
Okay.
which means that this kind of a bubble, even if it bursts, it'll be very localized, it'll be very sort of limited, right?
Okay.
The bigger bubble risk, I still think, resides in companies like, SpaceX, Anthropic, OpenAI, and the so-called hyperscalers like Amazon and Google and Oracle. If
Okay.
any of them mess up, that'll have bigger consequences for the industry, for the economy, than in our little niche, right? Like, that's my take, but
Okay.
we'll see. I mean,
That's fascinating. It's
who knows,
it's
right? Like, it's all
yeah,
crystal ball gazing. But anyways, I
exactly.
mean, this will play out very rapidly. At least whatever
Yeah,
is going to
yeah,
happen,
yeah,
it's going to be done in like 2 to 3 years. Like, we're
yeah.
not going to be sitting here like 10 years from now
Being like,
discussing this topic. We will have a very
yeah,
good. We can check these transcripts
yes.
and see how it all happened.
What came true, and how did it play out? Because I think it is because there's everything that has happened with AI, and that it's happening so quickly, and it feels like, we're all sitting here on the sidelines with our popcorn, those of us who are not in the weeds busy coding, and but there's the sense that things are happening right in front of your eyes, and you don't really know, it's not sure exactly how it's going to all play out. And so there is that element of uncertainty and wonder, and what is going to
Yeah.
happen. So finally, what do you see as the kind of opportunities from the space that you've come from in terms of the conference? Because you were saying now that some things seem to have solidified. So obviously the fact that there are more competitors, but more the sense that, as you were saying, companies are more interested in other or external tools rather than trying to build their own tools. What
Yeah.
other things did you kind of see as the future of this particular industry, or as the future of these particular companies?
Yeah, I think one thing is clear. Pretty much everybody is aware of all the workflows that they want to automate with
Okay.
AI. They have pretty much decided these are the workflows we want to automate. We want to try to simplify, streamline, etc., etc. They also decided more or less that, at least on the corporation side, that they're not going to build this themselves. They're going to use the best-in-class tools. So all of those things are pretty solidified at this point, in my opinion. Now it's a question of, how fast they will adopt those tools, how well these tools come up to their requirements and expectations, etc. What I do want to mention is that I'm kind of presenting this as a bit of a static world where, like, the corporations continue to do what they're doing, or the law firms continue to do what they're doing, and they're just going to replace what they're currently doing, the tools they're using, with AI tools. That's not the only thing that's going on, though, right? What is also happening is their business models are changing because of AI, right?
Okay, yeah.
So, like, let's say if you are in the business of patent licensing, you're getting a lot of really good quality claim charts written by AI. So writing a good claim chart used to be a fairly massive effort. Like, you will say this patent reads on this particular element of this particular product, etc., etc., and you'll write these really elaborate explanations and analysis. Well, that's all done at scale by AI now.
Okay.
So now, like, these people who are in the business of, patent licensing, or, protecting their own IP, or protecting their products, intellectual property, those people are getting overwhelmed now. So that whole equation is changing as well.
Interesting.
Right? And there's so many such things going on where people are like, now that I have AI, I can flood the market with this, or I can do lots of that. Right? You can think about it from an acting standpoint, like, which is that, okay, sure, like, you continue with the theater on stage doesn't change much, but like, animated films, or 1 minute, those 1 minute shows,
clips,
right?
Yeah,
like,
but also commercials. I mean, we saw it with the whole Spencer Pratt in Los Angeles. I mean, I think he obviously he's not the first person, but that has entered this ecosystem, and I think that there's a feeling that consumers will accept that. We might not accept those AI actors for films and television series because it's not as compelling, but those short clips that were used as kind of promotional clips, I can see the commercial industry was going to change completely. And if you want to make an animated film, I have a friend who's been doing the voiceover for that. That the animated feature was made in a fraction of the time that it would have been made before, and he's been doing the voiceover for it. So you can, if you are not just an actor, but if you're a writer director, your ideas can materialize a lot faster than it previously took. So
so but like, one should see something completely brand new come out of that, right? So like, is there a new format, like, that'll suddenly become popular? Are we gonna, like, is there a new TikTok that is all synthetic, right? Like, that takes, like, these podcasts that we're doing, like, we can there's a synthetic podcast engine that'll now generate so many podcasts that, like, people will be consuming, like, instead of people doing like one podcast a week, like, are people going to produce one a day? And does that change the consumption pattern so that, like, these 2-hour podcasts turn into 20-minute podcasts or whatever, right? I mean, there's so many changes like that, like the second order effect, right? Like, when mobile phone came in, people are like, yeah, I can see my news and I can take photos or whatever. But then we got vertical video, then we got TikTok, we got Uber, like,
exactly.
These are the second order effects that are coming. And I think that's where we should be paying more attention, because the first order stuff, people have moved on very quickly on, right? Like, I mean, like this first order thing, like, oh, can you draft a patent with AI? Like,
of course,
50 companies are doing that right now.
So what's the next thing?
What's the thing that, like, does the practice of patent invention change? Like, how people invent and all? And I mean, obviously, that's a discussion for another day, but there's lots of things to think about from that perspective.
Okay. Well, that will be exciting to talk about next time. Well, thank you very much, Samir. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.